so that brings it back to me here, number 4. And I'm very excited because this means I get to take a guy in Marvin Harrison Jr. that I think is just absolutely outstanding. We talked to the ADP, best wide receiver candidate since Jamar Chase. Just outstanding player. Awesome, beautiful, lovely wide receiver. And I think he is quite happily picked 4. I think if it wasn't for the needs at quarterback, you can see a world where he goes higher. But it is the natural case, though, right? Where if theoretically New England was like happy with Mac Jones, or if they were like had signed a veteran quarterback, then he goes 3rd. He's that quality of a player. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the Leonard Williams year, right? Where teams that needed quarterbacks were just the picks 1 and 2. And so Leonard Williams, who I thought was the best player in that draft, he goes 3. And that's how quarterbacks go sometimes, is they get pushed all the way up to the front when they maybe shouldn't. I'm blanking. I don't remember. Ryan, was that the Goff Wentz year, or was that the Winston Mariota year? But either way, he's had a better career than all 4 of those guys.
The Goff Wentz year sounds about right. Could be wrong on that, but yeah.
It was one of the two. It was one of those 2 pairs of quarterbacks, and much like in that year, I think the best player is actually going to take a bit of a tumble just because he's not a quarterback.
Yeah. So I think let me pose this to you, because the Cardinals are obviously in a prime trade down spot potentially with those teams that need a quarterback. What would you do if you had both options on the table? Would you just sit and take Marvin, or would you trade back, say with the Vikings, and you get all that draft capital, and hey, maybe you go back up and you move up and you take one of those wide receivers. Maybe Marvin is still on the board, or maybe it's Malik. If you're the Cardinals, if you're the GM of the Cardinals, Matt, what would you rather do? Would you rather stick and pick Marvin, or trade down, get more picks, and maybe trade back up, or even stick at 11 and fill out some needs? Because the Cardinals, they do have a lot of needs on that roster.
Yeah, so I would, if it were me, because Marvin Harrison Jr. is a mega elite player at a mega, prime what position, I'm happy to just sit there and take the pick and use it on him. It would take, I just looked it up for reference here, it would take the Trey Lance trade, right? Like, that was a trade out of the 3rd pick.
Yeah.
But that would be the compensation I would need. I would need 3 firsts and probably that 3rd that they got as well. And look at what that trade has done for the Dolphins, right? That's the level of compensation I would need to move out of this spot if I'm Arizona. And look, Minnesota, they've got 2 firsts this year. So maybe 2 firsts this year plus a 1 in 2025. Maybe that does get the deal done. But man, I sure would like to just take the pick and take the mega elite player, because I feel a whole lot better about him being a mega star than I do about anybody outside the top 10. Like, at some point you got to look at these players in these spots and say, that's a legit difference maker. And I feel really good about the fact that he's going to be a difference maker, versus once you move too far down, like, yes, it's still firsts, but it's not quite the same first. That pick, especially Minnesota, that 2nd pick this year, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're getting really dicey once you get further and further down. And anyone can be a bust, of course. Marvin Harrison could go out there, get a case of the dropsies, forget how to run routes, and be terrible. But I feel a whole lot better about him than I do anybody else, though. So, and because I'm Arizona, I don't need a quarterback. I would just take the best player in this draft. Like, if I'm Arizona, I have the 1st overall pick, and I'm, let's say the NFL locks trading, well, I'm still taking Marvin Harrison. Like, he is better than those other guys if I already have a quarterback. So, to me, I would take Marvin Harrison. But if they came with the Godfather Trey Lance offer of 3 firsts and a 3rd, I probably am taking that. But I'm not real happy with myself.
Yeah, and listen, if you do get that offer and Marvin isn't on the board, you can still take Malik Neighbors, who a lot of people, seems like, from according to Schefter, a lot of teams are having Malik as their number 1 receiver on their board. So you can be like, hey, we might have missed out on Marvin, but we added Malik Neighbors, a guy that just got explosive playmaking ability to this roster that needs it at that wideout position. That position certainly lacks it. And so if you do get that offer, great. Monty Ossenfort would just love to just take more picks. But that means, hey, that the Chargers are willing to trade down. They can like, hey, we want to trade back up. We got this, this, and this. Chargers, they take that. They get more picks, and Cardinals get, Neighbors or Dunze or whoever they like. So speaking of the Chargers here at number 5, and I don't know, we didn't discuss this. Are we doing trades in this mock?
No, we are not. And I actually got really annoyed earlier today because I went to CBSSports.com, and they have a really well laid out website where it's like, here are all the mock drafts without any explanation. And you can see all 6 of their mocks in one place. It's really, really good design. All 6 of those mocks have at least one trade in the top 10. And then I went to NFL.com, and the first 4 mocks I found on there, all 4 of them had at least one trade in the top 10. And I'm like, is there just no mocks anymore that are just like the order? It really does annoy me that they just do not happen at all. I get it. I get that trades happen. I get that, having some mocks happen that do have those trades involved. Sure. It's out of hand though. It's too much. So we're gonna be different, Ryan. We're not even gonna zig or zag. We're just gonna go straight because everybody else is zigging and zagging back and forth. So we're just gonna stick with the usual here.
Okay. So Chargers at 5 here. Listen, I got number 7 on my mind with the Titans, so I got that one. So I'm also debating internally. What do I want to do here with that pick in mind?
You're picking as the Chargers. All right. Whatever you think the Titans have to do, the Titans have to deal with whatever happens with the Chargers here.
So for Harbaugh, I mean, it feels like they do want to build on the offensive line. And for the Chargers, it does seem like this is the year to take an offensive lineman. Now, Pipkins is a solid right tackle. He's not the best. And you can also take a look at that Chargers roster. Wide receivers a need. And there's a lot of other needs on that roster. And when you take a look at next year, some guys aren't going to be there. And so you have to keep that in mind too with this pick, in that maybe you take a Joe Alt and you place him at right tackle. But since we're not doing trade downs here, I do think in the actual draft, if they are presented with this scenario, they probably would trade down. They take Latham or Fuaga. And then they got that need a receiver with Malik Neighbors. And we don't – I really don't know what Harbaugh will do here. I've had Neighbors mocked in both mock 1.0, mock 2.0. I think I'm going to say he's going to go offensive line. I think he's going to take Joe Alt and put him at right tackle.
I definitely agree with you from a personality standpoint. They want to build that line. That is kind of where I think they're going to go. I did cave today during my mock I made, and I put Neighbors. They're the Chargers. But, man, the more and more I think about it, I really don't think they go receiver at 5. I actually think Dallas Turner is maybe a sleeper candidate to go here to the Chargers, and maybe it is a scenario where the Chargers trade back a little bit, and then they can still find a way to get him. Because Bosa is he definitely has his injury problems, and he's quite expensive as well. They may want to move off of that deal at some point. Khalil Mack also very old, and so by the time they're good again, he won't be there. So I could totally see them going edge rusher as well. Brock Bowers, I think, is really intriguing for the Chargers because we know the history of a Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman offense with tight ends with Vernon Davis. And then also, of course, for Greg Roman in Baltimore with Mark Andrews. But even in his 1 year in Buffalo, or in his 2 years in Buffalo, one of those 2 years, Charles Clay actually led the team in targets at the tight end position. So I think Brock Bowers could be in play there. And if Bowers doesn't go to the Chargers, I'm curious to see where we end up having him fall in line. Yeah, no, I totally get that though with Joe Alt. And I know, Ryan, that broke your heart as a Titans fan to have to do that to yourself.
Now at 7 with the Titans, I'll tell you what. I'll throw a couple other scenarios here. If you're the Titans, if you're Rankin Thone, and let's just say in this scenario, Joe Alt is gone, Marvin Harrison Jr. is gone, Malik
Right,
Neighbors is gone,
right.
and we're not doing trades here. Would you stick here and say you take Roma Dunze, you take the second left tackle, which is probably Olu, or would you trade back and get more
If
picks? Try to get that third back.
if I were mocking trades, this is I think where I would mock the first trade. Like I don't think I would mock the Chargers trade necessarily, because there's just so much high end talent there. I think Harbaugh would want to take one of those guys. This is the point where I think I would see a trade happening. Although honestly, like I guess it's probably to go up and take Rome, right? Because looking at this board, let's say you are the Vikings. Spoiler alert for what's coming here, Ryan. But like if this board holds still, JJ's not going until you're picking at 11, right? So it's kind of, maybe you catch wind the Raiders are also trying to make a trade too, right? That's totally possible as well. It's you have to outbid the Raiders or the Broncos. But yeah, no, I think this would be a move here where like if the Jets want to get ahead of the Falcons to take Rome, I could totally see that. If there's a mystery team that wants to go up there and get the last true alpha wide receiver, I could see that as well. And there's, there's 28 teams who would love to do that, right? Every Buffalo, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, right? Like if Brandon Ayuk gets traded, you can see a world where the 49ers make a move up. So yeah, I could totally see this being a spot where a move would be happening for someone to come on up and get Rome or JJ or the quarterback, right? Like you can go both ways on that.
Yeah, I think because you got the Vikings, you got Denver, you got Vegas, all there 11, 12, 13 that see JJ falls like, hey, this is manageable. We can go make the move up to 7. And honestly, if I'm the Titans, I'm looking at maybe the Raiders because they got that third round pick that you're lacking. It's like, hey, let's swap first. Give us your third. We'll make the move. And if you're the Titans, I think maybe Olu is there at 13. And
it would
you
take more for me. It would take more for me to move that far than just a third round pick.
I'm just saying hypothetically, I'm sure they would ask for that. They would throw in something else, but maybe get some 2025 draft capital in there. But I think, you get that third round pick back that you want so desperately. So long, saying that at number 7, I'm going to have them taking Rome.
Okay.
I'm going to have them going to Rome. I just think, it feels like with draft analysts, it feels like wide receiver has kind of become an afterthought because you got Calvin, you got Hopkins, and I can understand why. But Hopkins is in his 30s. Calvin is going to be 30 here soon. Hopkins' deal only he's a free agent after this season. You're going to need somebody out there. And Burks, he hasn't really proven anything. Phillips hasn't proven anything. You're going to need another guy there that can go and catch contested balls. And Rome did that so well at Washington. And Will Levis, strongest arm that the Titans have had in quite some time for a quarterback, he's able to throw those balls, and Rome, I think, could be able to catch them. So I think wide receivers kind of become an afterthought with some of these draft analysts, and I don't get why, but I get why at the same time.
Well, and I could totally see a later on in the draft trade away of Hopkins too, right? Where Hopkins doesn't fit the timeline the Titans are in. Sorry, Ryan. But I think the next time the Tennessee Titans are good, DeAndre Hopkins isn't playing football anymore. And he sure as heck isn't playing it for the Titans, right? I could see that being the case.
Yeah.
And so maybe it's a thing where they haven't traded Hopkins yet, but they want to make sure they can get Rome. Because there's a scenario, too, where it goes QB, 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 receiver, 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 and then you missed out, right? So I can totally see that being the case too, where maybe it's like, hey, now we trade Hopkins for a fourth, in this draft or for that third round pick that you're missing. I could totally see that planning out too that way.